Good afternoon or evening or morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to the Kayla Show here. We're going to talk about the microbiome just because we can. And I'm going to wait another minute. People are streaming in as we're talking here. And well, it's sort of midsummer. I don't know about you, but I'm taking vacations this year. I've historically not taken a lot of vacations, but my office manager kind of required it. So I did a week-long bike ride. Now I'm going to go to a juice fast place. Trying to take care of myself here in my old age. And one of my personal obsessions for the last 2 years has been looking at the microbiome and trying to figure out how all this testing works. And so I wanted to talk tonight about a couple of things, a conceptual thing about how we can view the microbiome and why it's important. And then I want to talk about a practical thing, which is how you can interpret commensal bacterial markers on a couple of different tests. So we'll combine the talking with the practical. And then what we really want is for you to sign up for my mentorship program. There are still spots available in the group that's getting going right now. It is a great class, and if you are on the fence about it, you should sign up because it's a really good class. And we have a good group that's about to start. And let's see. So let me show you, let's do a little preview workaround here. So I'm going to show you when we do organic acids testing, which we all do, hopefully. Well, that's a little fuzzy, isn't it? Let me get you a more clear copy here. Sorry about that. But here, yeah, let's go back up here. Sorry. This is just like being in a regular class now, where I'm just like scooting around on a bunch of labs. But here we go. Here's a clear one. So when we do organic acids testing, there is a section at the last page that talks about gut bacteria. And I find in general, most people don't understand what the heck is going on with this section. So I want to talk about this because the point of this whole section is to look at the commensal bacteria. Who would have thought? We didn't know that, did we? No, we didn't, but now we know, so we're excited that we're in this class. So we're going to talk about commensal bacteria vis-a-vis organic acids testing. And then there's another more obvious thing, and a lot of labs do this. I'm just happening to show you a Genova test, but many other lab companies do commensal bacterial markers. Genova has the most, I think, of all the different companies. In fact, they have a whole page of them, and they title it, strangely, Commensal Bacteria by PCR. So this is all the commensal bacteria here. And because there's 24 of them and we only have an hour, I want to focus on 3 that are ultra important that we should just immediately go to when we're interpreting these labs. And the first one is disulfovibrio-piger, D-piger. That's the one that's implicated in cardiovascular disease. We should look at that real quick as soon as you get these labs. Akkermansia muciniphila, that's the one that has a really strong role to play in reducing inflammation, keeping the gut lining healthy, immune strength and whatnot. And then Methanobrevibacter smithii, okay, which is it's a methane related bacterial. Okay, so these are all 3 really super important. And for the health of the gut. And if you see D-piger, Methanobrevibacter smithii, and Akkermansia muciniphila, all 3 of those in the normal ranges, you've got a pretty decent lab test on your hands with a pretty good microbiome. Okay, so again, D-piger, M. smithii, Akkermansia muciniphila, these are 3 of the bellwether markers on this test. All 3 of these are normal. You got a pretty good lab on your hands. So the person's going to be pretty healthy. Now, as you can see from this simple example here, this person has a high level of M. smithii. They have, let's see, normal level of the Akkermansia. So you'll very rarely see all 3 of these lined up properly, okay? But anyway, so those are things to screen for. And then again, as we're looking at these commensal bacteria in the lecture portion, let me just show you, again, with the organic acids test, there is a whole section of the test By the way, this is what it's like in class, right? Doctors submit a lab, and then we go over the lab in class and talk about it. So making tonight a little bit more like a class. So here is it's an organic acids profile from Genova, 0091, that's the test number. And on this particular test, right in front of us are these sections, right? And this whole section here is tracking commensal bacteria. Who would have known? It doesn't really tell you that. I've never heard this in a ton of different classes until a few years ago. So, you can really misread this. Benzoate, hippurate, phenolactate, phenylpropionate, parahydroxybenzoate, all these markers here are looking at the commensal bacteria. Okay, so if these markers here are high, that's not necessarily a bad thing because they're tracking commensal bacteria. Indican is a marker for protein digestion. It also implies that there's tryptophan-related problems. Tricarballate is a marker for magnesium-related issues. D-lactate is a marker for a neurotoxin. The Clostridium marker here, the marker for Clostridial overgrowth, but that's not C. difficile. There's like, I think 600 plus species of Clostridia. This is just one of them, so this is not the bad one. And then the last marker down here is the yeast or fungal marker. So anyways, we're gonna go through this section because I find it's generally misunderstood and most people don't realize that the bulk of this section is actually testing for commensal bacteria. These are the good guys, and I'll show you some examples of that in a minute, okay? So again, we're talking about the good guys tonight. Let's go back, look at the lecture material, kind of set the stage, and then we can interpret some labs, and then you guys can rush at the end of this talk to sign up for the mentorship. And you can do this every week. Oh, and I'll show you in a few minutes what the mentorship looks like in case you haven't seen it. So microbiome, function and dysfunction. And then, I think there's a central question here, which is an eternal question. I'm not saying that I know the answer. I don't think anyone does. But, are pathogens destructive when the microbiome is robust and balanced? Okay. So in other words, even a GI pathogen is contextual. In other words, in a really healthy microbiome environment, a GI pathogen may just be there and may be just sitting there doing nothing. If you're well protected, right, you got a pack of wolves, that's protecting you, then not that much bad stuff can happen, okay? So if your microbiome is balanced, then you're really going to see a lot of these chronic GI problems disappear. So I think we need to have two skill sets. We need to be able to develop the skill set to identify and eliminate GI pathogens as needed, and we need to be able to have the skill set to rebuild the microbiome. In all honesty, up until quite recently, my idea of rebuilding the microbiome was killing the Giardia, killing the H. pylori, and then saying, here, take these probiotics for a few months and really, don't come back. You can't just hand somebody a bottle of probiotics and say, good luck with your microbiome. We have to actually get in there. It's a treatment. You have to get in there, analyze it, treat it, to make it better. And all these years, in my practice myself of just treating pathogens and GI bugs, and then kind of, to be honest, feeling like my job was done and then blowing off the GI microbiome restoration part of the program, I think is really not a good thing that I've been doing that. So I want to make sure that kind of get the word out that you don't need to do that, and that in some cases you may even work on the microbiome first and then come back and realize, ooh, maybe I don't even need to treat the pathogens because now the microbiome is working well, okay? So pathogenicity of microbes in the human gut being redefined based on our growing understanding of the nature of commensal interactions. Turns out this stuff is really, 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 really important. So the idea of it just being good guys and bad guys and that they're in fixed positions is not necessarily true. Okay, so one of the things you can do is obviously assess the pathogens, and there's lots of great lab companies out there that do that. But as part of that assessment, you should also have a general understanding of the status of the commensal bacteria, because ultimately at the end of the treatment program, you're going to want to have the commensal bacteria or the microbiome in great shape. Or if you want to take this to a more radical extent, you could say you might even want to fix the microbiome first before you even go after the pathogens? I'm leaving that as an open question. And remembering that the pathogen commensal relationship can shift. So you can have an organism like Bacteroides fragilis, right, that can be not only a pathogen in some situations, but in the colon can be a super important key component of your immune system. How crazy is that, right? You can have an organism like Bacteroides fragilis that's actually directing and controlling the immune system. Without this organism in your gut, your immune system starts to fall apart. B. fragilis penetrates into the mucosal lining of the gut, and it lives deep down in the crypts, and it has all these different things. It's a fascinating bug if you want to read about this more. It has all these different things that it releases and controls so that it can regulate your own immune system. So we've got all kinds of organisms like this, right? This is a quote from back in the 60s. The states of health or disease are the expressions of the success or failure experienced by the organism in its efforts to respond adaptively to environmental challenges. So in other words, if your microbiome is in beautiful shape, you may not have any problems, even though you have Giardia or H. pylori that are quote unquote infecting your gut. And as the microbiome robustness and balance fades, these chronic low-level infections can flare up and become very symptomatic. So really the off and on switch in how the purported pathogens are going to affect us is the status of the microbiome. So we have to pay attention to it. You have to learn how to fix it and how to test for it. So remember also there's these different groups of organisms, of commensals, and this is just a partial list. But there are, I just want you to start to think of these in functional categories, right? So this first group, the Bifidobacterium, the Faeculobacterium protsnitzis, these kind of things, the one that's the most famous, the Lactobacillus, right? These organisms are taking dietary fibers and breaking them down into sugars and short chain fatty acids. Okay, they're taking dietary fibers and degrading them or breaking them down and making these short chain fatty acids that then are the fuel supply for intestinal lining cells. This other grouping of organisms, this other functional grouping of organisms is producing hydrogen gas. Your Rosburgia, your Ruminococcus, your Bacteroides vulgaris, these are organisms that are producing hydrogen gas. Okay. So you've got a group that's breaking down fiber, you've got a group that's making hydrogen gas, and then you've got a third grouping here of organisms that are consuming stuff, right? They're consuming hydrogen, right? That's being produced by those other organisms, okay? So not all of these are. The Akkermansia muciniphila is kind of in this top 3 group, but it's actually it's chomping on the mucin. It's chomping on the layer of the lining of your intestinal tract, okay? On the mucosal lining, the mucus sitting up in there. It's kind of chomping away on this stuff. So you've got organisms that are breaking down fiber, you've got organisms making hydrogen gas, and you've got organisms that are consuming the hydrogen gas. So you can imagine how complicated this gets, right? So for example, let's say that the organisms that are consuming hydrogen gas are low. That could be happening because the organisms producing hydrogen gas are low. And that could be happening because the organisms breaking down fiber are low. Okay, so these groupings are functional, but they're all interactive. They're all overlapping. They're all dependent on one another. Okay, and this is sort of, community of effects going on here. So if you don't have enough dietary fiber, you're not going to get the organisms that, you're not going to have enough of the organisms that break down dietary fiber because that's their food supply. If you don't have enough hydrogen gas, you're not going to get the ones that live on hydrogen gas, and so on, right? So these are all dependent on one another. So you start to think of these in terms of functional groups, and the other issue is the 3 bellwethers, M. smithi, D. Piger, and Akkermansia muciniphila. Okay. And the M. smithii, hydrogen consuming, and its name implies what it makes. It makes methane. Okay. If you want to get really technical about this and you're like a total science nerd, it's actually technically not a bacteria. It's an archaeon, which is kind of cool. We don't have time to get into this, but I geeked out on this over last summer because my sister is a high school biology teacher, and we were on vacation visiting my mom's family on the Big Island, and we just got into this whole kind of like week-long discussion about all these different organisms. But anyways, M. smithii is not a bacteria. So not all these organisms are bacteria. It has this whole different category, right? If you're a biologist or what do you call it? Like a animal kind of person that likes to classify things, it's an archaeon. So you should read about that too. The fact that it's producing methane is pretty wild. Anyways, D. Piger is producing hydrogen sulfide. And speaking of Hawaii, remember the volcanoes blowing up in Hawaii? If you're around a lot of hydrogen sulfide, it's not a good thing, right? People die from that stuff. But we have this organism in our gut, D. Piger, that's actually making hydrogen sulfide. Obviously, it's a good thing in small amounts for human beings, but not such a good thing if you breathe in a lot of it. And then Akkermansia muciniphila, mucin grazing, it's the one that's like a little lawnmower going across the mucosal layer of your gut, and it's chewing up and feeding on that mucus. And just like if you're growing a lawn, you need to cut it once in a while. It's not a bad thing that Akkermansia muciniphila is chewing up the mucosal layer. It's regenerating it. It's using that as a food supply. It's keeping it trimmed like you would trim the grass. So it's not a destructive organism. By any means. It's actually extremely important. Okay, so these are the three bellwethers: M. smithii, D. Piger, Akkermansia muciniphila. You might want to spend some time looking at them. There's tons of research on all of those. And then there's these three functional groups: breaking down of fibers, producing hydrogen, and consuming hydrogen. So that's kind of big picture stuff. Okay, so now let's look for a moment at the labs, and let me show you where to go. Here. So let's first look at what we just talked about so you can see how this gets represented on the lab report. Again, you got to hunt around a little bit for these, but I'll circle them for you so you can see. Here we have our page on the GI effects. This is a lab test that Genova lab runs. And you'll see they're classified in this test by phylum. So they're organized like they would be in a biology book, right? By phylum. So we have the Bacteroidetes phylum, the Firmicutes phylum. So these are naming classifications that biologists just love, right? They love to name stuff. But we're more interested because we do functional medicine, don't we, in the functional categories. So that's why I wanted to show you. There's these groups of organisms you can group by the function of breaking down fiber, the function of producing hydrogen, and the function of consuming hydrogen. And then the three bellwethers you want to keep your eyes out for, I'll just review one more time. Disulfovibrio Piger. Okay. Sulfur is in the name there, Piger. D. Piger, people usually call it. Methanobrevirbacter smithii. Methano, that's the one member that produces methane. Okay, again, methane's in the name there, M. smithii. And then here's our little favorite mucin consuming guy that's chewing up the mucosal layer of your gut, but in a good way, it's maintaining the lawn, Akkermansia muciniphila. So these are the three bellwethers. You want to, when you grab this lab report, look at these three first. If they're all three in good shape, then the patient's in good shape, okay? So that's the highlights. And you could go on and on for hours and days about each one of these other ones, but that's one I kind of give you a bigger picture view. And then I want to show you one other thing here. I'm going to say this a second time, which is that when we look at the organic acids test, here's one right here, the compounds of bacterial or yeast origin, let's talk for a minute about where all these come from so you can see what I'm talking about. So remember that Sorry, I've got my signals crossed here. Let's see. There we are. Remember that there's two things that the microbiome has to have. There's two things that these bacteria have to grow properly. One is dietary fiber, because remember that first group feeds on the fiber. You got to have dietary fiber for this to work. And do most people eat enough fiber? No, because people don't eat a lot of vegetables or beans. So number one is dietary fiber. And remember that first grouping, that first functional grouping uses a dietary fiber. It breaks down that dietary fiber into short chain fatty acids. Okay, it gets this whole ball rolling. So you got to have a high fiber diet, which boils down to vegetables and beans. And then the second category that you have to have is what we're looking at right here, is dietary polyphenols. So these dietary polyphenols we eat, that's like your blueberries have the blue stuff, right? And your broccoli has it. All the vegetables and fruit that we eat are full of these polyphenols. And what's really interesting is that those polyphenols are not for us. And I always thought that the polyphenols were, for human tissue. The polyphenols are what these bacteria, these commensal bacteria feed on, okay? And you can see here, when they feed on those dietary polyphenols from your fruits and vegetables, the bacteria then release benzoate and hippurate, phenylacetate and phenylpropionate. You see the phenol in there? Phenol, polyphenols, phenylacetate, polyphenols, phenylpropionate, polyphenols, right? These are all connected. And so when we look at the organic acids test and we're looking at benzoate, hippurate, phenylacetate, and phenylpropionate, as well as a couple of these others down here, what you're looking at is how well is that person doing with their diet? Are they getting enough polyphenols in their diet, enough vegetables and fruit to feed these bacteria to make these compounds in the urine? And we can come back and look at the sugars thing in a second, but let's start with this because you really want to know how to interpret this because it's super helpful. Basically, this lets you know if your patients are eating enough fruits and vegetables or not. Okay, so remember what we just looked at. There's our benzoate, our hippurate, our phenylacetate, phenylpropionate, maybe phenyl, parahydroxybenzoate, and parahydroxyphenylacetate. Okay, phenyl, right? Phenols. So these markers here, from 36 through 41, are looking at the effects of the good bacteria. And where you want to see these markers is in the high end of the normal range. That's not a bad thing. That's not SIBO, okay? It's the opposite of SIBO. It's un-SIBO or DEBO, or I don't know what the word is, okay? Remember, these are showing you, is the person eating enough fruits and vegetables that they're getting these polyphenols to drive these byproducts up. Honestly, I've been totally honest with you guys. I don't know why, because it's going to make me look like a moron. But for years, I actually kind of thought that when these markers were high, it was kind of something like SIBO. I thought it was bad. Okay, it's not a bad thing. These are commensal bacterial markers, not pathogens, not bad guys. Okay, and besides, you're measuring almost all this stuff that's happening in the large intestine, not the small intestine anyways. But so anyways, this whole grouping here, 36 through 41, again, I'll mention the names: benzoate, hippurate, phenylacetate, phenylpropionate, parahydroxybenzoate, parahydroxyphenylacetate. These are all markers of, am I eating enough vegetables and fruit? If that patient is eating enough vegetables and fruit, you'll see high normal levels. That's what you want on this. Do you want low levels? No. Low levels on this test means that they're not eating enough fruits and vegetables. This patient is not eating enough fruits and vegetables. They have low levels, okay? So low levels on this section is not a good thing. That's not enough fruits and vegetables. You want to see a robust and healthy growth over here, okay? So the best version of this test would be high normal range here. This would be your ideal patient, and you would say, gosh, Henry, you are eating enough fruits and vegetables. That is just a wonderful thing. And when you see low markers here, there's a problem. Okay, so that's step number one. Step number two, indican again can mean a lot of different things. thinking about protein digestion, hydrochloric acid levels, but can also be an indicator of tryptophan deficiency, okay, and tricarballate, if it's out of balance, if it's high, can be an indicator of magnesium problems. So it's nice, you have these extra little markers, tryptophan, magnesium, to correlate with your other data. And then remember, D-lactate is a very special marker. So D-lactate goes up when there's a lot of bacterial overgrowth, but D-lactate in and of itself is a neurotoxin. So a lot of these markers are just markers. In and of themselves, they don't cause a problem. They're just telling you what's going on. But D-lactate is unique in that it acts as a neurotoxin. So if D-lactate levels are up, you've got the potential for brain-related problems that are directly related to the gut. Okay, so always look at D-lactate. If it's high, you've got potential gut-brain connections there. You've got a neurotoxin at high levels. The Clostridium marker is not a marker for C. diff. It's another Clostridial organism. It's, you know, it's what it is. It kind of helps you. You might want to give some probiotics if you see that one high. And then this marker here is completely different than any of the others. This is a marker for yeast or fungal overgrowth. So if anything, this is one that if it's high means that things are bad, right? That's bad, 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 bad. But up here, not bad, not bad. I misinterpreted this lab for like 15 years. I'm just saying it's a little embarrassing. So hopefully you guys don't have to go through that. Okay, remember these markers all, These markers all here, commensal bacteria. Is my patient eating enough fruits and vegetables? Where do you want to see them? You want to see a high normal across the board here. That's your perfect patient, perfect diet. If the levels here are low, you're not getting enough fruits and vegetables. The microbiome is suffering, right? Because the polyphenols from the fruits and vegetables and the fiber from the fruits and vegetables is what's feeding the good bacteria. So low levels across the board here means not enough fruit and vegetables, means a weakened microbiome. Okay, so that hopefully helps clarify a few things that I wish I had known. And here's another visual that we just saw. Dietary polyphenols, your fruits and vegetables, the bacteria feed on them, and then boom, you get your benzoate, hippurate, phenylacetate, and phenylpropionate. Just because I don't want you to get totally confused, and this is worth the whole hour of listening to me yak here. I want to just say one more thing about benzoate and hippurate, because like, how are you ever going to know this otherwise? So let's see here. I don't know why this one is so fuzzy. It didn't used to be fuzzy. Oh, maybe it's getting less fuzzy. Maybe it's my eyes, not the lab. I think it's fuzzy. You guys could vote on whether it's fuzzy or not, but I think it's a little fuzzy. All right, we'll go back to the other one because I'm confused here. That's not the right one here. Hang on a second. There it is. All right. So, okay, one other little factoid. And I should, this is not the best example, but I'm just going to draw it on here so you can see it. So this is a relationship between benzoate and hippurate. So you can clearly see where we are in the test. It says compounds of bacterial or yeast fungal origin. Does it say compounds of bad bacteria? No. It really should say compounds of commensal bacteria. Right? They could have put the commensal word right in there. Then maybe we wouldn't all be so confused. So this is clearly a bacterial marker section, and we just sort of verified that by looking at the details on what this all means, right? That the benzoate and hippurate are a result of bacteria feeding on polyphenols. However, the benzoate and hippurate are cleared in your liver. So this can be a very extremely super duper helpful thing to know. And this has saved me in so many cases, you guys. This is like totally worth the price of admission, and this class is free, so I'm kind of making a joke there. But if benzoate levels are high, okay, you should always see hippurate levels high as well. Let me say that again. If benzoate levels are high, you should always see high levels of hippurate. If you ever see a lab where benzoate levels are high and Hipaa rate is either normal or low, that's a liver detoxification problem, okay? Specifically to do with glycine and phase 2 liver detox. The reason being that in your liver, your body has the ability to convert benzoate to Hipaa rate, which it will do in order to knock all this stuff down and get it out. So if you can't convert benzoate to Hipaa rate, and that benzoate is high, but the Hipaa rate is either normal or low, that's a major liver problem. So if I was in control of the entire world, which is a possibility, but it's probably not that likely, and I could redo this test, I would put benzoate and Hipaa rate in 2 places. I would put it here where it is, that's fair, but I would also put it up here in the liver section, because you're very, very often, okay, very, very often gonna see that benzoate is high and Hipaa rate is either normal or low, and you know, boom, you're going to catch a hidden liver detox problem that might not show up in other places on the lab. So you just write that down somewhere in a notebook or whatever. Benzoate high, Hipaa rate normal or low means that you are having a problem with the liver. So you can use these GI markers to also track liver detox capacity. Okay, kind of handy. D-arabinitol. Somewhat controversial. Almost all these markers are controversial. You get enough lab guys in a room, they'll argue about, I don't know, the paper clips, you know. But I find D-arabinitol a very helpful marker, except you can have really bad yeast overgrowth and the D-arabinitol marker will be normal. So it's not definitive. It's just another piece of data that we add into the puzzle. I had a patient this morning. It's a great story because it's a true story. We can call her Ethel because that's pretty close to her name, but that's not her real name. And Ethel, she's the sweetest old lady. Okay, so I love her so much. She does an organic acids test every 6 months, no matter what. And then she comes in and she's one of these people that reads everything, and she's probably in her late 70s or early 80s. And she's just like, it's like talking to your grandmother, but it's like your grandmother was like ultra cool and really into natural health. So she comes in and she's like, Dr. Kalish, I saw my labs. Dr. Kalish, I saw my labs. She's like all excited. My D-arabinitol is 110 now, which it was. She's like, last time it was a 30. And she says, I know what happened. I know what happened. We built a new home and I was so stressed and blah, blah, blah. And I've been eating sugar for 3 months every day. I never eat sugar. And it's so cute. So like her D-arabinitol just shot up. And it had been stable. We test this woman every 6 months, year after year after year. It had been stable and great for a long time. She didn't eat any sugar for a long time. She's building this house with her husband. They get really stressed out about the new house, and they're moving into the new house. And then she eats sugar every day for 3 months, and boom, her D-arabinitol goes from a 30 up to 110. That was pretty cool. So anyways, when it works, it works. However, you will have some yeast or fungal cases where the D-arabinitol is completely normal. So you have to look at each one of these labs in relation to other tests. And the GI section of organic acids is not a substitute for stool testing. Okay, so you can miss, in other words, you can get some false negatives with D-arabinitol. You have a really bad yeast overgrowth, and it may not show up. Whether that's because it's a different species of yeast or because the lab is just not accurate in certain cases, I don't actually know the detail on why. I just have seen this year after year after year. So if it's positive, it's tended to, in my case, all the cases I've ever had, be very accurate, but you can get false negatives with the D-arabinitol. Okay, so be a little bit careful on that. Now, another point you want to think about, and this is true for yeast, this is true for all of these organisms, is that any organism that is found as a commensal can become pathogenic if it's overstimulated so that the levels dominate a microbiome lab profile. So you could have a certain amount of yeast in a person's system that's totally normal and not a problem. They shoot up from a 30 to a 110 and they're all of a sudden extremely sick, and it makes sense that there's an issue there. You can also have an overgrowth of the cardioprotective D-piger. So in the right amount, D-piger is cardioprotective, but an excessive amount produces what? Remember, this one produces hydrogen sulfide. Big problem. That's the gas that's emitted from volcanoes, right? You're standing near the volcano, you don't notice that this gas is coming out, and all of a sudden, boom, you're dead. One of my cousins on the Big Island actually works in one of those hydroelectric plants, and they have all these masks and monitors and stuff, because this is like a serious problem. It's like life or death with hydrogen sulfide. So again, we're talking about tiny, tiny amounts of hydrogen sulfide that Deep Hydro is making, but if it goes overboard, you're going to have some problems, and you're not going to be very healthy if it's overgrowing. So the good organisms are all relative, right? More of a good organism isn't better. It's the right amount. It's the balance of the organism that makes sense. And it's true for, if you think about nature, there's a picture of nature. So my mom is hilarious. She's 81. She's almost, 81. She's going to be 82 this year, I think. And her new goal, every time I see her, she's like, Danny, my new goal is I want to see the 5 major rivers of the world. And so every couple months, I'll give her a bunch of cash and then she'll take a trip. So she just got back from China. She grabbed all her old lady friends and like 6 of them went to China to see, I guess, the Yangtze River, something like that. And then she came back and then I had a little extra money from some stuff I was doing. So I gave her some extra cash and now she's got tickets with her old lady friends and they're going to see they're going to the Amazon to take a trip down the Amazon. So funny. Anyways, that's my mom. So ecosystems, right? This is an ecosystem picture here. You're thinking about these bacteria coexist with one another. They coexist with the pathogens. So with the broader picture that we can take of all this, the broader view that we can take of all this, the more benefit you're going to get. I think the main central question with any patient that you're working with is, do you want to strengthen the microbiome first before you do any pathogen killing and see if that's enough, or do you want to go after pathogens first and then strengthen the microbiome afterward? But that we really want to get away from these bad habits that many of us have developed of treating the pathogen and kind of blowing off the microbiome part of the correction, not really bringing that system back on. Okay, and again, establishing a healthy microbiome is the long-term goal to help prevent pathogen infections. Pathogenicity of most organisms now being looked at as highly dependent on the state or the status of the commensal population. Okay, and so you want to do this in stages. You want to figure out the complete picture of the pathogens, the complete picture of the commensals, and start to make a go of it that way, okay? So potential pathogens, same, I just said this, but we'll just hit it again. When potential pathogens are detected, the next question is whether robust, balanced growth of the targets included in the commensal bacterial markers, right, are good or not. Generally, it's not the case, so the commensals are going to be part of the overall treatment. And let's look here. Now, there's another big thing that, and I always get confused by this, so I thought I would just mention it, is there's also a bunch of opportunistic bacteria that a lot of these different lab companies report. I think almost all the companies report this now in different ways, whether it's by PCR or by culture, yeah? So your Klebsiella, your Morganella, your Pseudomonas, your Citrobacter, Enterobacter, right, Staphylococcus, you see these on all the different major lab companies' reports. Again, some of them are by PCR, which is a DNA-based testing, and some of them by culture. And so the tricky part about this is that you never know really what to do with these. Like, how bad is it that the person has a Klebsiella overgrowth or Morganella, And are you going to treat it with an antibiotic? That doesn't make any sense, right? Because these organisms are, the result of antibiotics typically, or the result of suppression of the good bacteria by some force of nature, whether it's an antibiotic or a food or whatever people are doing that's suppressing their good bacteria. So it doesn't make sense to nuke them with antibiotics. Then you're kind of struggling with, could we just strengthen the organisms around them and flush these guys out? And I think you have different levels of potential treatment that can be really effective. So let me show you here. And this is probably not a news flash for any of you guys, but maybe just something that's worth mentioning, get your thinking process going. Because I think there's these different layers that you can address this at. Here we go. So you have at the simple level, you can do prebiotics and probiotics. And diet, right? And really try to get the microbiome going that way. That's kind of obvious. If I could spell diet, it would be a little better, wouldn't it? There we go. All right. And the next level up is you can do prebiotics, probiotics, and enzymes in HCl and glutamine powders. And if you're going to use glutamine powders, don't be a wuss about it. You know, give them at least 5 to 10 grams twice daily. Don't give them like 1,000 milligrams or something. You really want to crank up the glutamine powders. 5 to 10 grams twice daily. You know, I learned that from the naturopath that trained me 25 years ago. And then I kind of got to be a wuss about it. And I started to give people low dosages all these years. And now it's like, no, don't do that. You know, 5 to 10 grams twice daily. Really crank up the glutamine if you want to do something significant. And then you have the option of killing bugs, right? So those are probably your 3 big categories. Pre and probiotics, diet, get the microbiome going. Second category, add stuff in, your enzymes, your HCl, your glutamine powders. One more thing I'll add in here, which I've had some really great results with, would be bile acids. I've had 5 or 6 cases in the last 5 or 6 months that I just knocked it out of the park because I really support the person's gallbladder. And these are patients that have been to every doctor on the planet. People just forget about the gallbladder. I don't know why. Why do people forget about the gallbladder? It's a really important organ. And so again, I've had at least 5 or 6 cases recently that were just, made me look like I was a saint because I just aggressively gave the person gallbladder support. So don't ever forget that, because when the bile is not being released properly into the small intestine, it's like bacterial party time. It's just, you're going to have some really significant stuff. And most all of us are thinking enzymes and HCl all the time, but make sure in the back of your mind or in the front of your mind, you're thinking gallbladder, gallbladder, gallbladder. Especially for those SIBO type people, especially for those really inflamed gut people who have the bloating kind of thing, and they just like treat these gut bacteria and then they keep coming back. Just really consider gallbladder, okay? Man. I know you think this is a lot of information. Take my year-long class, man. I'm going to do a promotional thing now. One of the doctors just chimed in, but let me see here. Because this is like, if you ever seen the TV show Portlandia, this is like Danlandia here. Danlandia. I spent like 12 years building this thing. And by the way, I've been teaching this class since 2006. I've never taken a salary. All the money that I make, I know we charge a lot. It's 13 grand for this course. All the money that we get just goes back into building an even more intense software program. I live off my practice, and I take all the money from the training program dollars that you guys pay, and I just keep building this thing out and building it out. So at this point, I don't even know what the total tab is. But so anyways, here's the community that we built. If you look at something like clinical topics, you're going to see, and this is all part of the year-long mentorship, evaluating technology applications, energy production issues revealed by organic acids, T-cell polarization problems, developing your business plan, marketing plan, power to practice, patient consult videos, how to do a report of findings. It's just like on and on and on. There's like literally thousands of hours of stuff in here on every topic that you could imagine. When you look at the case study library, you could type in something like, I don't know, GI effects or microbiome. Or let's type in, what's a good one? How about Blasto? Type in Blasto. And we have like 2,000 case studies. Case study number 1,790, treatment plan for a 10-year-old with Blasto. Case study 891, 9-year-old is anxious and has Blasto. Case study 132, Blasto be gone, right? And each one of these case studies is transcribed. It's got a video. So anything that you come up against in class from the testing, we have a response for it, right? And then every week we have a live call where, just like tonight, review labs and go over all the questions that the doctors have. So we have this massive case study library, thousands of cases. We have these content and resources section here, which, I mean, you could type in anything. Let's see, let's find the search engine here. You could type in like legal. I mean, really, you could intellectual property basics. Oh, this was a really good one. This is an hour-long interview I did with an IP attorney. Super valuable. It's like a $500 thing right there to talk to that guy for an hour. Advanced clinical rounds, transcriptions. It just goes on and on and on for every subject we have, whether it's legal or whether it's H. pylori. It just goes on and on and on and on. Okay. Tons and tons of information in here, all kinds of interviews, and then we have the live weekly calls, the community, and then the regular content. And the regular content is taught in a systems-oriented way. You learn about adrenals, neurotransmitters, female hormones, pathogens. We have all the protocols all written out, so you know exactly what supplements to use. Tons and tons of lectures on each topic, and it's really a pretty intense program. Okay. All right, so now we're going to end the advertisement and back to our regular programming. And we got a few more minutes here. And maybe I should leave it open for some questions. Now, this is worth mentioning, okay? Because this is a conundrum that we face with a lot of cases. I mean, I'm up against this one a couple times a week, probably. So what if you document on a stool test that they have a protozoa of some kind, right? They have ehisto or crypto or something like that. Is it really going to be enough to strengthen their microbiome? I don't think so. Honestly, I think there's times when we just have to get in there and kill stuff. And so now the question though is, you want to be strategic about it. You can still use this microbiome information to your great advantage simply by either preloading the program with microbiome balancing stuff, or by, after the killing is done, spending 3 to 6 months really tweaking the microbiome and getting it back on track. And not, again, just giving them some probiotics after everything and hoping that it all works out. So in other words, try to think of it this way, like think of the main job is to get the microbiome back in balance. And if and when you need to kill pathogens, you do that, but it doesn't take away the fact that you have this bigger picture in mind. And you will find that, and this is a good point here, it's worth highlighting, parasites exert their invasive actions in the mucosal layer where a host of commensal microbes flourish. Remember, this is back to the neighborhoods from the first talk. So multiple commensal microbe, metabolic products, and parasite-degrading enzymes and host immune system factors combine to shape the clinical outcome of these infections, right? So in other words, the strength of the commensal bacteria, their ability to make enzymes that degrade parasites, the commensal bacteria's ability to modulate the immune system is going to have a huge impact on you being able to clear these bugs. And in fact, if you ever have a patient that has recurring candida, recurrent cryptosporidium infections, they have H. pylori, it keeps coming back and causing them problems, it's almost certainly going to be because you don't have the microbiome figured out yet. And so you don't have these parasite degrading enzymes. You don't have the host immune system upregulated because you have a lack of these commensal organisms in the mucosal layer, okay? This is really, really important in the bigger picture. And if I take a step back and we look at what we're doing with functional medicine in general, many of the important cases that we have are going to revolve around your skill set and ability to treat the gut. So these are, issues that are going to, cross over to many, maybe half of your cases or more you're going to have, okay? Another way of saying the same thing, in some cases, protozoal infections are accompanied by an imbalanced commensal microbiota that can contribute synergistically to disease progression. Now let's see here. Did I have, no, I didn't have these, okay. And I don't want to talk too much about the yeast thing, but let's talk a little bit about interventions. So one of my favorites now, because it's like, I'm actually favorite for all time, is berberine. What the heck? It has a really great increasing of, it has the effect to increase acromantium eosinophilia, which is one of those, the one that's out there with the lawnmower thing, chewing up the gut lining. It has a really positive effect on your intestinal permeability. And I always used to think that it was antimicrobial, but maybe it's a pro-microbial. Who knows what's really right? But anyways, it definitely helps the gut, and that's a really great product, something that I use routinely, almost every day, either berberine by itself or a combination product with berberine in it. And then I'm going to show you um, some other markers, and then let's look at some questions, okay, for our section on interventions. So let's go back here. Now remember, interventions for the organic acid section, if you see low markers here, increase vegetables and fruit. Pretty straightforward. If indican is high, you can use tryptophan. If tricarballate is high, you can use magnesium. If D-lactate is high, you got to kill something generally, okay? There's something going on. But if D-lactate is high, you should think about the brain and how the brain's being impacted. And then if D-arabinitol is high, you treat the yeast, okay? So those are the basic interventions on that section. And then there's a few things you can do here that you should just know off the cuff because they're kind of easy to know. Let me go to these guys here. And let me see here. Yeah. Sorry. There we go. Okay. So if you've got, remember the 3 bellwethers, if deep hydro is low, remember the name disulfovibrio sulfur? Guess what? You can use chondroitin sulfate to bring up deep hydro. Is that the craziest thing you ever heard? Didn't you always think you gave chondroitin sulfate to people with joint problems and their joint achiness goes away? Well, guess what? You can use it for deep hydro restoration as well. You could probably use other sulfur compounds like MSM, but chondroitin sulfate is a sure way to do it, okay? So you're treating a gut bacteria with a joint formula. I know that sounds a little crazy. It is a little crazy, to be honest. All of this stuff is a little crazy once you get into it. So Methanobrever Bacteria smithii, increased with, if it's low, increased risk of IBD. You want to add inulin. Okay, inulin will help encourage the growth. So this guy is inulin, this guy is chondroitin sulfate, and Akkermansia muciniophilia. Again, low levels of that associated with a high risk of diabetes. For Akkermansia, our good friend, where'd it go? Here it is. For Akkermansia, you can use chicory, you can use inulin, you can use FOS, okay? So you have a bunch of different options when you see these levels that are low to bring them up on the intervention side. Oh, and then we mentioned, I forgot, there's a whole slide on this too, on just to restate, Akkermansia muciniophilia also responds really well to berberine. So if you see low Akkermansia muciniophilia, you can think about berberine as well, all right? So now let's go look at questions that have come in. I'm going to wrap it up in a minute. Oh, and there's, wait a minute. There's one more slide. I always forget the most important slides. That's the funny part. I get caught up in this stuff. Where'd it go? Here it is. Yeah, there we go. Here, this is our advertisement. So sign up for the class. All right, so let me look at questions now. I'm gonna go back to the top here. Do we need to do both a GI map and the Genova stool testing? Yeah, they're pretty different purposes, right? So the GI map is very good for pathogen detection, but the GI effects test from Genova has the commensal bacteria. So as well as looking for pathogens. So yeah, there's different purposes. Karen, let's see. So yeah, this is all recorded. So you guys can listen to this in the future if you want to go back and take notes again. What do you do for someone who's had their gallbladder removed? I don't give them lifelong gallbladder support. Some doctors do. You would just want to give them, if they're having a lot of symptoms, probably higher than typical dosages of ox bile type products, the gallbladder support product. And all the companies should have something that's specific for gallbladder. And you just may need to have the dosages be higher if they don't have a gallbladder anymore. Let's see. Can we do both probiotics and kill at the same time? Yeah, absolutely, especially if the person needs the extra support. You can do the probiotics. So if you're going to do that, usually the herbs that are killers, the microbiome, I'm sorry, the antimicrobials would be given during the day, and you would give probiotics at night before bed. Oh, and then with benzoate, this is from Rachel, with benzoate high and Hipaa normal to low, what would you suggest? So, sorry, I didn't mention that. That was my bad. So remember, we talked about benzoate high, Hipaa normal or low. That means they need glycine, but I don't usually give them pure glycine because that's like a pain in the ass to just carry pure glycine. I'll give them a combo liver support product with glycine in it. You hit the other pathways too. I think that's fine. If you want to give them pure glycine, you can, but then I think it's just as well to give them a combination product. Ann, look at Ann Gibbons and ask a question. Hey, Ann, I haven't talked to you in a long time. She's an old student. Can you repeat what I was saying about indican? Okay. Hi, Ann. She's an old student I haven't talked to in a while. Good to see you're back here. What were you asking again? Let's see. What was it saying about indican? All right, let me pull that up real quick. I don't know where else you're supposed to learn this stuff. I'm not saying that I'm particularly smart because how stupid am I that I did this stuff wrong for 15 years? But where are you supposed to go to figure this stuff out? So let me go through this one more time for Ann and for all of you as a quick review. Indican, when it's high, okay, indican when it's high is a marker for poor protein absorption, protein assimilation. So you could obviously do HCl or check out their stomach if their stomach's all screwed up. But indican when it's high is also an indicator that they may need tryptophan, okay? That can help us sleep and other things. Not 5-HTP, but tryptophan. Tricarballate, when it's high, indicates the need for extra magnesium in their program. Okay, so tricarballate means extra magnesium, and D-lactate in and of itself is a neurotoxin. So if D-lactate's high, you've got a gut-brain problem going on there, okay? Let's see. So in my experience, how does test data compare between Genova and Great Plains? So I have a massive bias there because my teacher in all this work is Richard Lord, and he's the guy that designed all the Genova testing when Genova used to be Metametrics. So I'm 100% only looking at the Genova tests. So, I don't know. It's like I'm a basketball fan. I'm a Warriors fan. It's like asking me what I think about the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think this team just sucks, and I hate LeBron. But that's totally biased because I grew up in Oakland and I'm a Warriors fan. So, anyways, I don't know. The person to ask, is an old friend of mine. I haven't talked to him in years. Kurt Wohler is the doc over at Great Plains. He's a really smart guy. I would call Great Plains and talk to Kurt about it if you want to know about how Great Plains works. I have a lot of respect for Kurt. He's a really fine doctor and clinician, and he's been with Great Plains for a long time. I don't work for Genova or anything like that. I just, use them because my teacher is the one that created these. Let's see. A particular form of magnesium. Well, you know what? You want to hear something cool about magnesium? And we're going to end on this factoid here, but this is like so cool. So like you're thinking, you're just sitting there in your chair and you're going, I know this person needs magnesium, but I don't know what kind of magnesium I want to give. Okay. And then you look at their energy production markers. You see the ones on the screen here? And you're like, holy moly, they're really low in citrate. What if I want to give them some citrate? Well, wait a minute. Why don't I use magnesium citrate? The magnesium will help their low magnesium and the citrate will help their low citrate. How cool is that? Okay, and what if instead they had low malate? And you're thinking, this patient needs more malate, more malic acid. They need magnesium. I could give them magnesium malate, and the malate will help with their energy production, and the magnesium will help with their energy production and all these other things too. So if you want to get all fancy pants about it, you can pick forms of magnesium that relate to these markers here. If that's just too much bandwidth, then just give them, like a magnesium chelate from any of these companies, and you don't have to worry about it. So a chelated magnesium, usually they'll have, it's bound to a whole bunch of these different carrier molecules. You don't have to worry about getting all particular about it. And if that all falls apart and you just can't figure out anything, magnesium glycinate is kind of like a good fallback. You give them some glycine with it. Remember, when you're giving a mineral like magnesium, it's this big old honking molecule, and it's attached to some kind of carrier molecule, and the carrier molecule is what is absorbed and pulled in. So you obviously never take elemental magnesium. It's always magnesium malate or magnesium citrate. And same with calcium. It's calcium citrate or calcium malate or chelated calcium or chelated magnesium, where it's bound to these different carrier molecules. Okay, and you can kind of play around with that if you want to get fancy, but obviously you don't have to. But it's kind of a cool way to do a 2-for-1 special thing. All right. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. Thank you guys for all these really great questions. Oh wait, any biomarkers that indicate heavy metal toxicity? One more question here. Yeah, of course. Let's look at that, and I'll stop. So you can see what do heavy metals cause? They cause oxidative stress. So with a heavy metal case, you're going to see oxidative stress markers high, like this one here. Okay. What do heavy metals cause in terms of the liver? They're going to cause liver detox related problems. So with heavy metals, you're going to see one or more of these detox markers elevated here. Those are probably the main things that you see with heavy metal detox. Antioxidant markers are positive, or the detox markers here are positive. If you're doing ion panels, you can actually see the heavy metals themselves. I actually want to do a series of classes on this, so I'm going to end on this thought here to answer Karen's question too. This is probably the next thing we can get into, is that you can do these ion panels, right? These are extra cool. So you can do all the amino acids here. It looks at the minerals, and to answer Karen's question, it'll check magnesium, calcium, zinc, copper, selenium, and then of course aluminum, arsenic, cadmium, lead, mercury. So these are really cool, these ion panels, because you get all the heavy metals, all the minerals as well. You get all the fatty acids on these, all the fat-soluble antioxidants. Here's all the fatty acids, the omega-3s, the omega-6s. This is like the mother of all tests. This is my favorite patient of all time. She's low in omega-3 and omega-6. Favorite patient of all time. 25-year-old woman, comedian in LA. Put her on omega-3 and omega-6s, super high dosages. Boom, lifelong depression gone. It's like my favorite case of all time. I just kind of look at this lab sometimes, just like, yes. Because it's cool. It's this young woman. She's been depressed since she was a little kid. All we had to do was massively dose her on fish oils and omega-6s, and bam, the depression is gone. Didn't even give her a multivitamin. That was it. Just a bunch of oils, and her brain just turned itself on in like 2 weeks. Anyways, it's a cool case. So these are cool labs. And then some future classes, we're going to get into this stuff too, okay? Yeah, and we cover all this stuff in various ways in the class. We're doing more and more ion panels now as we get more into it, okay? All right, take care, everyone. We'll catch up with you soon. Bye now.